Hey everyone! I've once again been working on a side project behind the scenes, and now that I've finished, it is time to share. So for a while, I've been wanting to create some keychains, and I had some neat ideas, but I wasn't really sure I'd be able to make them work. Because I wanted to do double-sided keychains that would be different views of the same picture on either side. And this is way harder than it sounds at first, because you have to first draw something that works visually for the first side, so you have to draw something, and that's hard already. But then you have to make it work for the second side as well, and the silhouette has to match exactly, and both sides have to have the correct anatomy and posing, and both sides have to be pretty, or else what's the point? So there was a lot of work just in the beginning with this project, and I spent a good 2 or 3 hours at least sketching these keychains and my ideas before I even got to the rest of the drawing. Now I ended up having 3 ship charms, and those are Blicket, Glorybringer, and Moonbleet. All of them are double-sided with 2 unique sides, and I'm really happy with how everything turned out. Now these are available in my store along with a couple other charms and tons of other Wings of Fire merch, so if you like what you see, you should go check that out. I'm super excited to finally get to share these, because I've been working on them for a good 2 months now. So, first I made the Blicket charm. This one I had the clearest vision of in my mind, so it was probably the easiest to just knock out. I sketched out my rough idea for composition, which I totally did not remember to save a screenshot of, so I can't show you, but then I went over that sketch twice. And the first sketch is the rough pose sketch that you'll see in the beginning of the recording, and then I went over that with a third final sketch to get down my details. And the reason I do so many sketches for these bigger projects are many, but the main 2 are practice and detail. Now, the more work I put into a sketch, the more practice I've had with the pose, the expressions, and the lines themselves. Also, it gives me more chances to add in details before I actually set things in stone with the line art. Now, after I finished the sketch, I began working on my line art. The thing about this project was that I was having Blue and Cricket positioned back to back, basically, so I just needed to draw each of them on their front side and then duplicate that layer and flip it for the back side. Then I erased their silhouette and redrew them from the back. Honestly, since I didn't redo their heads, it isn't a perfectly faithful pose, but I couldn't have the silhouette changing even a little bit, and redrawing their head would have made that really hard. So I sacrificed a bit of realism for the visuals, and it's important with art, I think, to know when it's a good time to sacrifice something realistic for something stylistic. Art isn't a photograph, and it doesn't have to be 100% faithful to real life. It's okay to take some liberties so it looks nice too, and that's what I did here with both of their heads and also their tails, because I just drew their tail once and then copied it over and didn't really mess with it. Once I had the lines done, I basically just colored and flipped those layers too, and then the shading as well. Their tails took some time because I wanted to kind of have them woven around each other, and this was another thing I had to watch in my sketching phase because I had to make sure to position their limbs in a way that would work physically where I wanted their tails to cross. Now the last thing I really paid attention to with these 2 was their wings. I wanted you to see both of their wings on either side of the charm, so I needed to position them just so. You can definitely see more of Blue on Cricket's side than Cricket on Blue's side, but his wings are much larger, so there's not much you can do to get around that. And I didn't forget Cricket's glasses for once, so there's another win for me, because if you've been watching me for a while, you will notice that I forget her glasses all the stinkin' time. All told, the Blicket charm took me about 3.5 hours from start to finish. It probably took the longest, but it was also my first one, so I spent a lot of that time just figuring out my technique and the mechanics of drawing a truly double-sided design. So the Blicket charm, like I said, I kind of had figured out before I started working on it, and most of my struggle was just getting the exact positioning down. But I didn't need to figure out the pose at large because I kind of had already figured it out on my head. This was not the case with my Moonbleet charm. I must have drawn 7 ideas for this before I found one that I liked. I mean, I knew I wanted a Moonbleet charm, but the pose had to reflect their personalities and relationship and all that. And I loved their color combo, like the light and the dark, so I wanted to get a sort of even mix of both colors on both sides. I kept coming up with these poses that were really happy and stuff, but I felt that with Moon and Keebly's story, they needed a pose that was more bittersweet or soft almost, to reflect all the hardship that they went through together in their arc. Blue and Cricket, I feel like, are more innocent in a way, so a happy, easy pose for them made sense. But for Moon and Keebly, I wanted something that felt a little bit deeper. Honestly, y'all probably can't even tell the difference, and you're like, what is she even going on about? But it mattered to me in the moment, okay? Anyways, so this one took a lot more work to get situated, but I do really like how these poses turned out. This one ended up being a lot easier to actually draw since both dragons look the same on both sides, other than Keebly's earring. So instead of worrying about anatomy and posing and stuff, I could just draw it one way and then flip it for the other side. And it was pretty easy to give them each a dominant side because the pose actually worked out fairly simply for that. I did a bit of adjusting over the first sketch just to make sure certain elements could be seen from both sides, like Keebly's tail barb and the tip of Moon's tail. Like I said with Blicket, I just wanted a maximum of both dragons showing on both sides. Now once I finally got the composition down, this one went a lot quicker than the Blicket charm. Again, the flipping was much less complicated for this piece, and I had to redraw a lot fewer parts of it. It was really just a matter of drawing the art itself. I did end up having some trouble with Keebly's positioning, and I'm not like 100% in love with it, but I messed with it for a while, and this was the best I could come up with. So his neck and shoulders gave me a lot of trouble initially. I think I had to redraw his head a few times too. Moon, however, gave me no trouble, so there's that. Y'all know I'm a huge fan of drawing Moonbly in any form because their color contrast just does things to my brain. It's light and dark, but it's also cool and warm since Moon is a bluish green and Keebly is a yellow red, so the color contrast is just gorgeous for me. One thing I do like about this charm too is how square the final shape ended up being. My charms are 3" by 3", so when I have a more rectangular one like the Blicket charm, it ends up being more like 2 by 3". But this one fills out the space nicely, and I love how that worked out. In all, this charm took about 2 hours to actually draw, but I think if I counted all the sketching, it would get closer to 3 hours, just because of how many concepts I threw out and then scrapped during the planning process. And again, I didn't remember to screenshot any of those, so I can't actually show you any of that work. And finally, the third double-sided charm I put together is a Glorybringer charm. This one is a little different than the other two, since unlike Blicket and Moonbly, it isn't two sides of one scene, if you will. It's the exact same image flipped, at least line art-wise. I had at first envisioned another pose set up similar to the other two for this charm, but I was having so much trouble getting it to work on paper. Plus, this was right after my Moonbly posing nightmare, so I was looking for other options by this time. And then I thought, hey, here's an idea. Glory has so many interesting color options. Why not explore some coloring fun instead of posing fun? Especially since the other half of this charm is Deathbringer. And don't get me wrong, I adore Deathbringer, but between the two of them, I think we all know who's more visually attractive. So I knew I wanted to focus the piece on Glory, and from there I decided to go all in and really experiment with her coloring. Now, I've never really truly done a piece with Glory where I did alternate coloring for her. A big reason for that is that even though Rainwings can change their scale colors, their most common coloring, Fanon or Canon, play a big part in their recognizability. So it's hard to really change that a whole lot, and I've never messed with it before. For one, Glory's coloring is gorgeous as is, but for another, I just really don't want her getting confused for anyone else. But a double-sided charm offers a unique opportunity for me, because on the first side we have Glory with her normal coloring. It's pretty obvious who she is, which means that on the second side I have a lot more freedom. It's easier to recognize who she is because I've already got a picture of her on the other side, so that means I finally get to try out some wild coloring. So I decided I wanted to go for some pink streaks. Like, she's kind of in her normal scale pattern, but she's happy enough that other colors are drifting across her scales. I had intended to go back through and manually recolor all the pink stuff after getting it drawn on and the layer locked, but I accidentally set the pink layer to overlay, and then I noticed how cool it looked like that. I'd intended to do some rose pinks and darker colors, but the super light cotton candy pink looks amazing. So I fiddled around with the settings for a bit and ended up keeping my happy accident. I'm honestly super glad it worked out that way because I might have scrapped the pink idea otherwise. I mean, I was having a lot of trouble and a lot of doubt about it, since I'd never really done a piece with her coloring like this before, and it was super intimidating to me, and Just, I was having a lot of doubts about that time in the process. But that overlay layer totally saved the concept for me. I did put a layer over that into a couple of the pinks by hand, just touching up a few areas where I wanted the colors to look different, namely her underbelly where it was so light you couldn't really see that there was a difference, so I went dark there instead of light. But overall, I accomplished exactly what I wanted from them. The pinks floating across her scales are chaotic and disorganized, but a beautiful set of shades that really make that side pop. I was a little iffy about it at first, like right after I finished, because it is a pretty busy color palette, but the more I looked it over, the more I fell in love with it. It's just such a pretty design. Characters aside, this side is just very visually pleasing. Now, a couple other things I did with this charm that I liked. Deathbringer's scars are different on both sides, which I thought was a neat little nod, even though it's not technically a double-sided image. And Glory's expression is slightly different on both sides as well. On her normal side, she is glancing away slyly, perhaps teasing Deathbringer, but on the pink side, she's looking him in the eye and smiling softly as the rosy colors spreading across her scales betray her true feelings. In the end, it's pretty tough for me to try and choose a favorite from among these charms. Each one is so unique, even though all three of them are clearly a set. I love the color contrast on Moonblee, I love the posing on Blicket, and the pink coloring on the Glorybringer charm really blew me away. I really can't decide which of these I like the most, but y'all feel free to let me know in the comments. And like I said in the beginning of this video, these charms are available in my store along with a couple other charms I put together as well. I got a pretty limited amount of these and I really doubt I'll do a reprint, so if you want one, I'd hurry because I don't know how long they'll last. But if you're interested in merch, but not these keychains, I do have a ton of other neat stuff available over there, so I'll put a link in the description and y'all can check it out. Alright. That'll about wrap up this little design diary, so thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, I have lots of other design videos up, or art stuff in general. Go ahead and leave a comment with your favorite charm. It's such a hard choice. Thank you for sticking around, and have a wonderful week.
You and only